Alrighty, cherubs, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our second day in the ancient Near East. Last time we talked Babylon and Sumer. Today we're going to be talking about Assyria, so we're going to go further northwest and talk about Persia as well. But first, make sure that you take the quiz. It's the next page in just right after this one. And take the quiz for these items. Last time's pieces. Alrighty, just go ahead and take that quiz. Pause this and come on back so that you can learn about these pieces. Okay? I'm assuming you paused. I'm assuming you took that quiz and you've got 100%. So we're going to move on. We've got these two pieces today, numbers 25 and 30. All right. Now, here is, again, the ancient Near East. So we started down here with Ur and Uruk, Sumer, this region. We've moved up to Babylon, and now we're going to move up to Assyria, okay, to Ashur, to Nineveh, to these cities over this region up here. The Assyrians are going to be one of the most powerful nations in the Bronze Age. Okay, they're going to be really, really, really aggressive and powerful. They're going to wipe out everybody in the Fertile Crescent and down into Egypt. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to pick up whole populations of people and move them around the empire. So, to break national unity, okay, they were ruthless, okay, they were bent on conquering. So let's talk Assyria. All right. First, we're going to watch this little clip about the empire and who they are. Maybe.
Before the sun never set on the British Empire, before Genghis Khan swept the steppe, before Rome extended its influence to encircle the Mediterranean Sea, there was ancient Assyria. Considered by historians to be the first true empire, Assyria's innovations laid the groundwork for every superpower that's followed. At its height, in the 7th century BCE, the Assyrian Empire stretched across modern Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and parts of Turkey, Iran, and Egypt. Its wonders included a vast library and large botanical and zoological park. But the story of Assyria's rise to dominance began many centuries earlier, in the late Bronze Age, in a city called Ashur. Ashur was a tin and textiles trading center located along the Tigris River in northern Iraq. It shared its name with a god thought to be an embodiment of the city and later of the entire empire. For the administration-minded Assyrians, politics and religion were closely linked. Around 1300 BCE, a high priest named Ashur-uballit I took the title of king and initiated a tradition of military campaigns, effectively transforming Assyria from a city-state to a territorial state. This meant that a single administrative entity oversaw many places, cultures, and peoples. For the next 150 years, Assyria extended its reach and thrived. In the 12th century BCE, a mysterious catastrophe that still bewilders archaeologists caused the Assyrians to lose much of their territory. A few hundred years later, however, Assyrian kings began a new round of conquests. This time, they honed their administrative system into an empire that would last generations. Assyrians were military innovators and merciless conquerors. During their conquests, they used siege tactics and cruel punishments for those who opposed them, including impalement and flaying. The growth of their empire was due in part to their strategy of deporting local populations, then shifting them around the empire to fulfill different needs. This broke people's bonds with their homelands and severed loyalties among local groups. Once the Assyrians conquered an area, they built cities connected by well-maintained royal roads. Often, when a new king came to power, he would build a new capital. With each move, new palaces and temples were erected and lavishly decorated. Although kings claimed absolute power, we know that an extensive system of courtiers, provincial officials, and scholars influenced affairs. At least one woman, Samuramat, ruled the kingdom. Assyrian rulers celebrated their military excursions by having representations of their exploits carved into the walls of their newly built palaces. But despite the picture of a ruthless war state projected by these records, the Assyrian kings were also interested in the cultural traditions of the region, especially those of Babylonia, a separate state to the south. Babylonia had been a cultural leader for millennia, stretching back to the beginning of writing at the end of the 4th millennium BCE. Assyria saw itself as the inheritor and protector of this tradition. Assyrian rulers supported scholars in specialities ranging from medicine to magic, and the capital cities, like Nineveh, were home to elaborate parks and gardens that housed plants and animals from around the empire. One of Assyria's final rulers, Ashurbanipal, sent scholars throughout Babylonia to gather up and copy ancient literary works. Ashurbanipal's library took the form of clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform in the languages of Akkadian and Sumerian. The library was lost during the final sack of Nineveh in 612 BCE, but thanks to a 19th century archaeological excavation, many masterpieces of ancient literature, including the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Babylonian creation epic, survive today. After centuries of rule, the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonians and Medes between 612 and 609 BCE. Yet the innovations that the Assyrians pioneered live on. Their emphasis on constant innovation, efficient administration, and excellent infrastructure set the standard for every empire that's followed them in the region and across the globe. Are there certain things that all empires have in common?
Okay. So it's kind of a brief overview of who the Assyrians are. Now, the piece that we're going to be looking at is called the Lamassu. This is from the citadel of Sargon II. It's in that second wave of, that's why it's Neo-Assyrian, that second wave of Assyrian conquest. And it's made out of alabaster. Now, alabaster is a softer stone, okay? And it's got this kind of this creamy, depending on the impurities that are in it, but this creamy color. And these examples here are housed in the Louvre, okay? So you can see here that the Lamassu is an animal-human hybrid, okay? It's a guardian figure, much like the Sphinx in Egypt. So they combine elements of a bull, a human, and an eagle, all right? And they stand here as sentinels at an entranceway, okay, in the palace, so that, to intimidate, okay? Think back to the idea of power and control. So you have these figures here that you have to walk past if you're going to get into an inner sanctum. So if you're going to speak with a higher official or possibly the king, you're going to walk past these, and they're going to dwarf you, okay? They're going to be extremely large. So you walk past them, and you feel like intimidated, and that's the point, okay? It's all about power and control. It's all about casting that image of power to your conquered subjects, all right? Now, if we take formally, let's take a look at the Lamassu. He's very square. He's very rectangular. He's not quite a full round sculpture yet. Okay, and when we talked about how sculptures could be relief, where they're attached to a wall, or full round where we can walk around them, he's somewhere in between. He kind of lives between those two worlds. So he's not full round yet because we can't walk all the way around him. He's still embedded to the wall. He really is just the corner of the wall, but he's done in a high relief, like an extremely high relief. You can fit your arms, your hands, and feel like the width of his legs. Okay, the face itself, yeah, you can see from three sides, but you can't see that back side of the head. So he's still, it's still a relief, but it's a high relief. Okay, you can see how much he's sticking out. This guy here in the back, these are high reliefs. Now you can also see that he's meant to be viewed from one of two perspectives. You're supposed to see him from the side in profile, or you're supposed to see him from the front. How the photographer has taken this photograph, we're not meant to see him by, because count the legs. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So if we're seeing him, so he's got 5 legs, and he's not really supposed to. The Lamassu doesn't have 5 legs. So if we check out this leg right here, this leg and this leg are the same leg. Okay? We're supposed to see him from profile or from the front. So this leg and this guy are the exact same leg, just shown from two different perspectives. Okay, he's got those horns just like Shamash did on the Stele of Hammurabi. He's wearing a crown. He's got this braided beard, this coiffured beard that kind of extends down his chest. He's got his feathers, okay, and more coiffured hair off to on his flank. All right, a serene face. He's not grimacing. He's got supremely serene features, but he's watching you. Okay, he's seeing you, and so again, you're meant to be intimidated by him. All right, this is my wife at the Louvre. And you can see again the size differential. You're supposed to walk past these reliefs and be in awe. And they would have been in awe. And they are awe-inspiring. They're huge. To look up into the face of these creatures. Okay? So the Lamassu, and here I am standing at the Louvre with one. Okay, so again, the Lamassu is animal-human hybrid, protector, guardian figure for the Assyrian kings. The Assyrian kings were aggressive, okay, as demonstrated by this guy who's holding a lion, a full-grown lion, and a club that he's going to bash. He's going to kill the lion with this club that he's holding, okay? So that's the Assyrians. That's Lamassu. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to Persia. Persia is in modern-day Iran, not Iraq. So we have to go further to the east. Let me scooch ahead. I didn't include a map. That's funny. Okay, so down here we can see this is Iraq. This is where Mesopotamia is. Persia is right here. Persia is Iran. All right? So we want to, this is where we're going next. So it's not really part of the same region. That's okay. We're going to back up and watch some clips. Dr. Nigel Spivey is going to talk to us about the city of Persepolis. The piece that we're going to be looking at is part of the palace that's in Persepolis. Now, the Persians are going to come along and they're going to conquer a much wider swath of land than the Assyrians. They're going to have all of what is today Iran, all of what is today Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt, as well as Turkey. So they're empire is going to be much, much bigger. In fact, they're actually even going to go into Greece. They're going to conquer Macedon and go up into Greece there too. So they were much more successful, and they were actually seen as being benevolent and being much. They were welcomed as a relief from the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Okay, because Assyria fell, like the video we saw, to the Neo-Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and they were just as aggressive and ruthless as the Assyrians were. So when the Persians came in, the conquered peoples that had been living under the Assyrians and the Neo-Babylonians, the Chaldeans, were relieved, and they threw open the gates, and they're like, "Yep, come right in," because the Persians let them go back to their homelands. All right, they let them go back home and be a people again. And a lot of people chose to just stay where they were, but some people chose also to go back to their ancestral homes. So the Persians were pretty well liked by everyone in the region except for the Greeks. And so we kind of have a notion that the Persians were the bad guys because the Greeks saw them that way. Okay, but really, contemporarily, they were seen as benevolent and kind of like just good administrators, good rulers that were much, much more tolerant than the Assyrians. Okay, so Dr. Nigel Spivey is going to talk to us about some of the things that as the Persian kings are going to try to do to unify their empire that is now. See, the Assyrians and the Neo-Babylonians, they were really like conquering people that were very similar to themselves. The Persians are conquering vastly different peoples that speak completely different languages that are not even, they're not regionally connected. And so they've got communication problems, and this is how he's going to, Nigel Spivey here is going to explain how they do, how they bring them together. Okay, so we're going to take a watch.
Leaders to communicate their power. Their new subjects simply couldn't see them. Around 500 BC, this problem was particularly acute for one king above all. He'd taken control of a kingdom so large it was the world's first empire. He needed to find a new way to impose his power across all of this vast territory. He was Darius the Great, the king of the Persians, and his capital was Persepolis.
So as they're panning across, this is what's left of the palace at Persepolis, and you can see here on the corner of this giant pylon here is a Lamassu. Okay, so they're going to be using those iconographic references. They're going to be stealing some of those. Okay. Also, take a look at the capitals that are holding up, or excuse me, these columns that are holding up this building, this structure, okay, which is no longer there. But these are the giant. I mean, these columns are enormous, okay, and the capitals that hold up the roof proper, the capital is the top of the column. Absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. Yeah.
Persepolis is in Iran, one of the wonders of the ancient world. "2,500 years ago, it stood at the heart of Darius's vast empire, an empire that stretched thousands of miles from the Mediterranean in the west to India in the east. From here, Darius ruled over millions of people across more than 20 nations. He carved the names of the most far-flung nations on a block of solid gold and buried it under Persepolis for posterity. But how on earth could he rule over so many diverse peoples? Darius came up with a plan, a new kind of political leadership which he outlined in a series of inscriptions. Their message was radical. Rather than war and brutality, Darius offered peace and cooperation.
In a war between two nations, I intervene to protect the weak. I am justice and have been asked by God to promote happiness.
Well, it's visionary stuff. The challenge to Darius, however, was how to communicate this to everyone else. His empire was one in which very few people could read, also one in which there were dozens of different languages. So how was he going to spread the word? Darius's brainwave was the beginning of nothing less than an artistic revolution. The walls of Persepolis are covered with awe-inspiring images, but there was something unusual about them. These stone reliefs are not just from one artistic style, but combine elements from all over the empire. The most spectacular reliefs of all are those decorating the staircase that leads to the Great Hall of Darius.
You can see here how they don't stick out very far. That's because they're a low relief, okay? So just compare that in your mind, the difference between this low relief and the Assyrian ones that we saw, which are a much higher relief.
Once a year, Darius would invite ambassadors from every nation within his empire to join him here. And as they arrived, all the ambassadors passed up this staircase for their audience with the king. So this was their approach to one of the most imposing monuments in the ancient world. The ambassadors' eyes would have been drawn to these figures, the conquered peoples of the empire. All are shown in their national costumes, bringing tributes to the king. No scenes of war and retribution. They're happy to honor Darius. So Darius had found an inspired solution to his problem. A way of communicating his political vision through art, the international language of images. The ambassadors would have left here and travelled home with one message clearly etched in their mind, that King Darius valued and respected them. A new benevolent political era had dawned.
Okay, does that make sense? So he's going to use his palace as propaganda to spread the message of his goodness and his benevolence. All right. Let's take a view of the palace. And I'm going to get rid of that music because that's super obnoxious. Okay, so here's the palace as it is and how it was. Let's make this bigger. So again, here's the Persian Empire. They're going to show you the extent to which it spread. So, it's truly, truly massive. So again, the recreations here are just stunning. Again, everything You see it is white or cream colored now, and it would have been richly painted and decorated um, in its day. So this vast audience hall held thousands of people. I mean, it was enormous. And I think that's something that is really hard for us to fathom unless we're there. Okay? Persian religion. So it would have just been this forest of columns. You walk in and just get lost in these um, columns. And again, the richness of this place, Lamassu. Okay. So that is Persepolis. That's what it would have looked like in its heyday, in its prime. Let's see if I can exit this. There we go. Okay. And we're going to skip that. So here is the audience hall of Darius and Xerxes. Now, the audience hall is exactly where Nigel Spivey was, where he would have received his guests, the Persian kings. So Darius, a Persian king, and Xerxes, a later Persian king. It's in Persepolis in Iran, and it's Persian. Okay? The audience hall is also called the Apadana. Apadana, audience hall, same thing. All right? There's a couple different views of it. So again, it would have held thousands of people and used for the king's receptions. Again, everything is meant to intimidate you, not to fill you with awe, not to scare you like you're afraid for your life, but to fill you with wonder and awe. Like, this king is so impressive that he can make all of this and make it and dwarf you. Wow, he's a really powerful guy. And like they said, look at these reliefs, these statues. He's got our back. Okay. So 36 columns, wooden roof. The columns have a bell-shaped base with a lotus blossom we saw. The capitals are either lions or bulls. The capitals, again, are that top portion. And the stairs have that relief of the king enthroned with his attendants. So it's going to be built by Darius and Xerxes, and it's going to be destroyed by Alexander the Great. Again, the Greeks do not like the Persians, and so they're going to try to wipe them out. Okay? So here the capital, here the columns, and the capital, this section right here, this is one of them at the Louvre. Okay, and you can see how just the capital, the top part of the column, is in comparison to a human. Okay, this is there's me. There's my group of students that went with me to the Louvre, and again, that's how big it is. So I mean, it's massive, and really quite a sight to behold. All right. They also, from the same palace, would have had these reliefs, these glazed tile reliefs of these ones are of archers, okay, to show their strength, show their power. Okay. So you want to ask yourself, take in your notes, how do these pieces relate to the idea of power and control? What are they doing to impress upon your mind that they are in charge? Okay. There's a quiz on these two pieces next time. And so make sure you make your flashcards. Now is the chance that you have to study your flashcards, go back from the beginning. Can you rename the prehistoric pieces? Can you rename the Mesopotamian pieces? Can you identify them with dates? Can you identify them by media? Can you identify them by culture and by location? Okay, so make sure you're studying those flashcards daily. Daily. All right. And that is it for today, and I will see you next time. Have a great weekend, and make sure you take the prehistoric test also.